Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Thanks sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Topps, Upper Deck, and Panini. My guest today is John Keating, a popular guest. We did ramblings. He accumulated some comments in person as through email over the last couple of months. So thanks, John. Thanks, listeners. And here is the conversation.
One of the most combustible topics in my mind is having people lead you towards how they want you to collect. I know as long as there's been advertising, but still it's for an endeavor that's supposed to generate happiness and serenity. I don't think that's the way to go.
Since I first got in the hobby, I went up to a dealer's table. What do you got? They were not trying to sell me things they didn't have. I pretty quickly figured out that what I wanted was what they were looking for too. So those were simpler days. But some of the stuff, even if they had it, they wouldn't sell it because they didn't have a duplicate of it because they weren't really true dealers. They were collector. They would sell their extras.
You know what? You don't hang out in that end of the woods anymore, but there are still a couple national level dealers doing that. Obviously, I can't speak for most of them. I assume most of them are collector on some level, but there are dealers that I know for sure are selling their duplicates. And if you looked at their tables, you'd be blown away by their collections. There's one I bid against. I know him. He knows me. We're friends, and bid against him for a 1914 Cracker Jack Ray Keating. And he's got dealer money, and he beat me out. And then at the National, he was trying to sell me his old one, which is an authentic. The other one was a one. And I'll probably end up buying that eventually from him. But he immediately put his duplicate out for sale at the National, which is pretty wild. And I know there's a dealer, Idaho Dentist, who specializes in Z-Nuts. And I'm trying to buy his 29 Ray Keating Z-Nut. It's the only Z-Nut I need from Ray Keating. And I can't do it. But he's got everything on his table is duplicates. And it's probably different than when you were back in the day because you've seen these tables at the National. They just blow you away sometimes. So it's neat to see that they're still out there collecting and you're buying duplicates and stuff like that. There's a lot of high-end dealers that probably not collectors at all, but it's neat to see the ones that are selling their duplicates because you get an eye into what their collection is, and it's pretty impressive.
It's a very short list of guys that'll not sell anything unless they have two of it. More now with the price of things, if they can't complete the set, and I got like this toward the end, is if you can't complete the set or you don't want to complete the set, you get a type card and then you get some others and you sell them because they're just going to be orphans. It's going to be a family of orphans, foster children.
That's okay, though. It all depends on.
It's okay, but if you're thinking about transacting it to something else that you really do want, but we're talking about people who really love the cards. And their end game is to have all the cards.
Guilty.
Yeah.
As I sleeve up my wacky packages right now. I'm talking to you. It's my origin story right here, though. It's living in Philadelphia. And we were living in my grandmother's house because we had just sold our house, and our house in the suburbs before we became Hicks wasn't quite ready yet. So spent 6 months or so at my grandmother's house, which was a block and a half away from our house in Philly, and a corner store across the street, like every corner in a city. And my mom sends my brother out for milk and a pack of cigarettes. He asked her with the change, can I buy wacky packages? My mom thinking he was going to literally use the change. So she gives him a $20 bill. Came to whatever, like $1.75 for a gallon of milk and cigarettes. And he bought $18.25 worth of the wacky pack. My mom thought he was going to spend a quarter. He spent $18+. So he was gone for 2 hours. The store is 60 feet from our house, right? So he was out in front opening the packs. He comes in the house.
No take backs.
His hands are full of wacky packs. He's got a bag with cigarettes and milk in it. Pockets are full of wax packs, ripped open wrappers, and his cheeks are bulging with gum. My mom hauled off and smacked that gum right out of his mouth. And he still remembers it to this day. And I still remember it. But that was the first time I knew that you could collect something out of a pack. 1973, I guess, early 74. But yeah, crazy stuff.
$18 would go a long way. Growing up Keating.
City kids, Philly, right? My mom was an A's fan growing up. She knew her stuff, that's for sure. And her parents, my grandparents were born in the late 1800s. So imagine what they saw. Connie Mack, two dynasties. What do you think the best era of baseball was? Looking back from 1903 on up. Give me a span that you think is the best year of baseball.
My knee-jerk response is that when I was a kid.
But you have to take a step back and look at it from a bird's eye view, because I would love to say the 70s, but from a distance, I feel differently.
I think older is better. I think they've messed with the game the last 50 years for sure. So the 50s, we only got 16 teams. Yeah. One topic is the baseball strike.
Yeah, it's ironic, right? I was thinking about that because I spent a lot of time sorting cards in my basement and thinking about what those cards have been through, obviously, whether they're vintage or tobacco cards or whatever. And I was like, 1994. I have a huge box of 1994 sets and all that stuff. The economic infrastructure, we talk about it as collectors, but it changed the way I collect. It changed the way I felt about the sport. I was wondering on the business level, was that a Black Friday moment for you? Obviously, nobody knew how long the strike was going to last, but at some point they canceled the season. What do you think as a titan of industry during that period? I imagine you were at your peak. What do you think the peak was for Beckett?
Titan of payroll. Big payroll then. And they weren't thinking they were going to go on strike. We pretty much kept full employment. We probably should have reduced staff, but we had done well in the years leading up to that. So we weren't in financial stress, other than the fact that during that time period, during the pendency of the strike, our baseball paid circulation dropped in half. That was huge. Baseball was by far number one. So it was a big hit. We may have been still profitable because of the other sports, but like concerts, publishing is a volume game a lot of times. You need to fill things up. You need to sell what you produce and all that. We had to make adjustments, so we cut production. A lot of card shops went out of business. A lot of card shops went out of business without paying us because we were the credit facility for much of the hobby. Most of our magazines were sold on consignment, the non-subscription copies.
How much lag was in that August of 94? They go on strike. When do you start to feel it? It's COVID, right? We didn't know how long that was going to last.
Yeah, I don't think anybody thought it was going to be forever. And I think there's wishful thinking in the beginning that it won't last as long. But like I said, we still had these other magazines and other things going on. So
did that boost your other magazines? Do you think
No,
you felt
no.
you didn't feel any, there was no crossover over to
No,
football?
but I think they didn't suffer as much, other than the fact that there were card shops that went out of business and didn't come back. So that probably was the peak around in there of the number of hobby shops, and not necessarily number of collectors, but hobby shops really. Even now, when we've seen hobby shop creation in the last couple of years, it's still nothing compared to what it was
Right.
at the time. Our magazines were part of that because you had a steady, every Monday there'd be a different magazine coming out, or whatever the day of the week it came in their place. So there'd be store traffic spread out over the month and new products coming out, but no new baseball. There was some baseball. Frankly, John, maybe it wasn't as bad as the COVID shutdown. There weren't games, but in COVID, they weren't mad at the players and the owners. They were maybe mad at the politicians or the epidemiologists, but they were really ticked off. I was thinking about this. What's a silver lining? That probably encouraged people to consider non-sport or non-baseball or Pokemon, because you've got Pokemon coming on, and being reliant on millionaire baseball players with billionaire owners all of a sudden didn't seem like such a safe bet. I did a podcast about NASCAR, acknowledging how NASCAR and maybe even hockey to some degree, I think the players regard the cards as helping to promote the sport. So
Right.
baseball and football also, they were having royalty set asides, certainly the Players Association, in anticipation of potential strikes. They had a strike fund, and that's happening. It's a free world. They can do that, but you would hope that would be leveraged to really get a deal. But at that point, it didn't. And if you fast forward another 10 years, almost exactly 10 years, I've discussed this with Victor Roman. The rookie card thing really came to a head in 2004. And I find myself in a serious discussion with the Major League Baseball Players Association, who was pushing for a new approach and a new definition of what is a rookie card. Now, when I'm discussing that with those entities, these are the same people whose bluff was called and did a strike. So when they're putting pressure on me, if you don't do this, no one will advertise with you. I said, we're not ad driven, but I'm just saying
To freeze you out.
they were
Right.
suggesting things. It wasn't extortion, but I'm sitting here thinking, you know what? They just killed the golden goose 10 years ago. So I'm not a golden goose. I'm just a
Right.
little small fry, but they cared very deeply from the highest up of the Players Association and Major League Baseball properties probably as well. They really care about the game, but they care about the game in the way they come at it. For the players, it's all about the players. For the leagues, it's all about the teams and the marks. So that probably factored into this is really dredging up some things. It also factored into my calculus, perhaps, that I had a heart attack a year later, after the strike. So probably there was more stress there than I thought. And that's when I quit doing daily pricing. And I think it put in motion my willingness to at least consider I wouldn't own the company for the rest of my life since I'd
Interesting.
almost died. So all of a sudden I'm sitting here. Baseball's not a sure thing. We were very profitable before. We were still profitable, but way less. At the peak, it was fabulous. And then when it became a business, we got into Pokemon and Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And all these other kind of non-sport things, probably as an attempt to diversify away from baseball and away from sports. And some of those worked really well, but that wasn't me. Like you're saying, I
Right.
was getting kicked upstairs and it was less fun to come to the office. I wasn't the expert in those things. You fast forward another few years, and I'm thinking, you know what? It's time for me to find a new owner that's going to be sympathetic to our industry, take good care of the employees, maintain our industry leadership. All those things. I had these lofty ideals that fell short. So that probably figured into my thinking. It's time for me to, and it was several years later, but I just can't tell you how much fun it was. It doesn't sound like fun now, but to have 20,000 card shops around America, really around the world, but mostly in America, that we were on a first name basis with, and we had all these customer service reps. We had more of a customer service orientation than a sales orientation. We weren't trying to increase their draws. We were trying to help them manage their draws because their eyes would be bigger than their stomachs. To see these mom and pops mostly going out of business was just sad. They
Right.
were our friends, our associates.
Most of them pop up, do you think, during the early 90s, or were there some
Yeah, in
long
the late
stand?
80s, early 90s, there were some that were longer. But again, one of the best decisions I ever made was having a separate baseball, football, basketball, hockey in that order of the sequence that we did them. And that really allowed us to spread our workload through the month. It allowed card shops to do that too. That was a good thing. So we were busy throughout the month, but baseball having a problem, there was a ripple effect because it was the cash cow for all those card shops. Like I'm saying, 89, 90, 91, the fact that there's an explosion, at least in our company, of new magazines and new revenue sources for the card shops. Parallel with that, there were a lot of card shops that came in. There, it get to be we're in a small town, there'd be 3 or 4 card shops.
Right.
Now they
Right.
probably shouldn't all have been there, but it was more about the new product, and even vintage was simpler in those days.
It's
So,
still distributors, right? They were going through
and
distributors to get the
mostly
product.
distributors, I would say. Yeah, a lot of distributors, heavy on the distributors. It was a know your customer kind of thing because the distributor you knew, and the distributor knew you weren't just a name. The distributor had probably been to your shop and knew that you couldn't sell 10 cases of this great product. Your store wasn't that big. You didn't have
Right.
that many customers. Again, there was some aspect of managing the business, just as we did, that you didn't want people to get overextended. But when the baseball strike came, you were automatically overextended
What was
because
your normal
dropping.
off-season flow like? A lot of canceled
It didn't
subscriptions?
drop
Because
off as much, no, because we had all these different other magazines. Even though baseball was the main thing, everything sold for 12 months. It just sold more in season.
we live in an era now where you do free trials or you cancel after a month or 2 months and stuff like
We
that.
never did that.
It
We had
was
no free trials, no free
right.
samples, but it's on consignment, and we're not going to give you too many, but we think you're going to be able to sell what we give you. And 95% of the time they could.
The hobby, it was never the way it was before the strike, but when do you feel like it got its legs back underneath of it?
A
How
bit,
long did it
but
take?
it never came back to the way it was. The enthusiasm for baseball at least in the home run chase, the McGuire, Sosa, and Barry Bonds, and these outrageous home run totals. And now we know how that happened, but that brought some energy back to the category, but not compared to what it was before, because that was contrived. Deep down, I think the fans knew this is contrived.
They threw jumpier baseballs in there at the National. I asked you about 2005, 2006. There was a drop off, I think in 2006 in manufacturers, heavy consolidation. I asked you, had you seen that coming? Because those things just don't happen overnight. The leagues and the associations have to have some sort of long-term plan. How fabricated was that drop off in 2006?
Are you talking about Fleer?
I'm talking about Donruss went away going into 2006. Any kind of database you look at, there are a lot few manufacturers in 2006, and the playoff, I think, went away, right? Was there a circumstance that caused that? On the business end, was that a problem? Meaning, were the manufacturers stumbling, or were they getting frozen out by MLB or the associations?
I don't know about frozen out, but in some of those cases, they were in debt to those exact same licensing entities of not having paid. They got in arrears on their royalties.
Usually you want to keep those people around, though, right? You're not going to get your money back.
No, but like I said, it's calling the bluff. If you don't pay this up, then we're going to pull your license. Donruss and Fleer were not little guys. They had some history and score, playoff, all those things.
Fleer was tough.
There were some management regimes in
buyouts
that caused some challenges.
Fleer obviously was owned by Skybox and Marvel, but the Ultra brand lasted well into the 2000s on its own, right?
Fleer was acquired by the Rite Aid people. They brought their experience to it, and I think commoditized. And that didn't work, because you look at some of the great stuff that Fleer had during some of those years, but apparently they weren't making money.
Rite Aid's
issues at that point. This was part of the family. We went up there and visited with them. We're not going to compromise our integrity, but we want to hear if they have substantive concerns. We listened, and we said, you're accusing us of things we're not doing. You're not aware of positive things we are doing. Let's get everything out on the table. What are you really saying? And we did. They were still frustrated, but at least they understood.
The son or the father you had to deal with this?
The son.
Yeah, I got you. Huh. Interesting. I didn't know that.
It was tricky.
It fits, though. Absolutely fits with that history of that organization.
And weren't they headquartered in Philly?
Harrisburg comes to mind.